Hey there, Catherine here. If you're joining me for the first time, my name is Catherine and I'm a transition and wellness coach for foreigners in Tokyo. And right now I'm on my way to meet up with my friend named Trey, and I'm basically going to bombard him with a whole bunch of questions on what his experience has been like living here. So if you want to know more about what it's like to live and work in Japan as a foreigner, then stay tuned because we're going to get started right after this. Okay everybody, so welcome back. I am here today with Trey.
Hi.
We finally got all of our drinks ready to go and we're just going to basically have a little conversation with each other about his life in Tokyo. So Trey, can you tell us a little bit about where you're from and what you do now in Tokyo?
Yeah, so I'm originally from Nashville, Tennessee,
Yeah.
in the U.S., and I came to Tokyo as a student when I was in college. That was about 22 or 23 years ago. Yeah, and after I graduated and then spent another year here after I graduated in university, I got a job here in Tokyo, and so I guess I have been in Tokyo continuously since 1996.
Oh wow.
Exactly.
So do you work for a Japanese company?
Yes, I work for a Japanese company. I work in advertising, but I specifically work with TV and TV data here in
Okay.
Tokyo. So it's a very domestic, Japan-wide service, but
Right.
it's limited to Japan for the most part.
Okay, I see. So did you have any hesitations about staying here in Japan, or was it just kind of like you were having a great time, might as well see how it is?
That's
Yeah.
sort of how it started out, because I was
Yeah.
a student, I got my first job here, and I stayed in that job for about 3 years. And when I changed jobs, I think
Yeah.
that was kind of the point where I realized it's stay here or leave.
Yeah.
And that was the point where after that, I kind of knew, at least in the back of my mind, that I was going to be here probably for a long time.
For a long time?
Yeah.
And are there other foreigners who work in your company, or is it just...
Nope, just me right now.
Really? Just
Yeah,
you? Okay,
just me.
so you have to tell everybody what it's like to work in a Japanese company.
Yeah. So, and any system has its good points and bad points, but it is
Right.
a system.
Yeah.
I guess it's hard to describe because every company would be different.
Yeah.
And also my other handicap in describing this is I've only worked for Japanese companies.
Right.
So I don't have the other experience. But from what I hear from my friends, for instance, consensus is very important.
Yes.
And I think that can drive a lot of non-Japanese people crazy.
Right.
In that, you kind of expect, a lot of my friends expect their boss to kind of make a decision based on the information and go with it.
Right.
And I think in a Japanese company, you'll spend a lot of time getting everyone on the same page.
Yeah.
And then there are a lot of meetings and processes to do that.
Right.
And I think that can drive some people crazy.
Yeah, it's more about like the group and how if everybody's together and their thought process is the same, and then you can take the next step.
Exactly.
And it's more about relationships too.
Yeah. So, and there's a lot of relationship-based
Yeah.
stuff that goes on, and that can really affect the way and the process that you work.
Right.
And that can be very different, from what I understand, than other non-Japanese companies.
Yeah.
Another thing which I think is also changing, for the better at least, is there used to be a lot of hierarchy, and things were decided based on hierarchy.
Yes.
If you had someone who was 1 year older than you, had gotten the company 1 year before you, they were to be treated, as a deity.
God.
Yeah. And then, the person 1 year below you, you can, do whatever.
Yeah.
And so that, we're getting to the point where that's changing for the better, I think. But
Right.
when I was just entering, that was kind of the way it was. So
Yeah.
you're going to have to be prepared for differences in style, differences in ways of working,
Right.
if you're going to jump in the Japanese company world.
I think a lot of people are concerned about things like rules, a lot of Japanese rules, and also overtime. Those would be the two things that I hear people complain about the most. Have you had any issue with that where you're just like, oh, why is it this way? Or, oh, I just want to go home, but we're just taking so long and I can't leave until other people leave. Have you ever had those types of experiences too?
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, definitely over time. Again, that's something I think is really getting better, and that's good. But when I first started out, that was not the way it was. And
Right.
yeah, you were there kind of late, doing whatever.
Yeah.
Sometimes past last train type of, thing. Last
Yeah.
train in Japan is like 11, 12. So, and in some companies' cases, your overtime may or may not be counted.
Yeah.
So that's another hurdle. But I do
true,
think
that's true.
that's changing a lot.
Yeah.
Like in my company now, we try to reduce overtime, try to work more efficiently, which is good, but that's a change in process.
I know, I remember hearing that in some cases there's not necessarily like a paid overtime, it's just kind of expected that you're just going to be there and do overtime, but it's definitely changing for sure.
Yeah, and that's definitely illegal, but it does happen in some cases.
Yeah.
But I do, again, things are changing for the better. And then the rules part, I didn't have that as much because the company I started out really small. We were a subsidiary of a very large company, which gave you the benefits of a large company and a small company. But the small company, the good parts about that were you kind of knew everyone, and if you didn't like the way something went, you could be like, do we really have to do it this way, or that type of thing.
So you were able to kind of speak up a bit more than you maybe would have if you were in a bigger corporation.
At least internally, but with the rules and regulations and customs that work with outside companies, like when the way you dress, the way you do the meiji, the way all that other stuff, that's hard to change.
Okay, so do you think that since you've been here for so long that whenever you go back and you visit family back at home, do you feel like you have like this reverse culture shock?
Definitely.
Yeah, so what are the things that you notice the most?
Decline in English language ability.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like many years ago, I went back home and I played Scrabble, the word game, with my family, and it was embarrassing. Like I felt like really like I was not sure I was clearing third grade level.
Right. Your words are only like 4 letters long.
Yeah. And so I think that's partly a function of operating mostly in Japanese every day.
Yeah.
So I do think there's that. And then my parents needed some help, so I went back home and I was running some errands for my parents.
Yeah.
And I went into the post office, and evidently there was something I'd forgotten how it was done or whatever, and I'm from the South, and so the woman said, "You're not from around here." And I was, but at the same time I wasn't, because I'd been in Tokyo for so long.
Yeah. There's 2 things for me, at least when I travel back home, that I notice a lot. One is that I'm bowing to everybody everywhere I go. I'm always like, "Oh, hi," like this, and I'm like, gosh, they must think something's wrong with her. The other thing is I tend to overpay when I'm like at the register so that I can get back a certain amount of change. Like let's say I want to get back a quarter, so I'll actually pay extra so that I can get a quarter back, even though I might need to pay less and then just get like a dime or a few cents back. And people are always confused when I do that. They're just like, honey, I don't need this extra change. Like, why are you giving it to me? I'm like, oh, I just wanted, an extra quarter or something. But in Japan, because the currency, it's basically most of the things up until 1,000 yen, which is around $10, is all in coins. Then you have more incentive to overpay a little bit so that you can get back bigger coins instead of a whole bunch of smaller coins. So that's another thing that I'm always battling people at the cash register.
The other thing I do is with embarrassing frequency, I answer my parents' phone with moshi moshi.
You do?
And I think I confuse their friends a lot. So.
Yeah.
Whoops. Sorry about
funny.
that. If you're watching, sorry about that.
So tell us a little bit about what a typical day is like for you in Tokyo. So I think people are always really curious about Japan because we hear that there's so many quirky things in Japan and different mentalities, but what is just your standard day like?
Yeah, like a weekday. Usually I get up in the morning. Usually it depends. Sometimes I get up 6:30, something like that. And then kind of get ready to leave. And then I like to, if I have time, go have breakfast somewhere. And then...
That's actually how we know each other.
We see each other for
We run into each other for breakfast all the time. I'm always grabbing a croissant. We're like, hey, good morning.
At the same breakfast place, so there are a few places that are on my way to work. And I usually bike to work if I can, if it's not raining or not the middle of winter or something like that. And then I usually get into the office, usually around 9 or 9:30, depending on the day. Sometimes it's earlier, whatever. Sometimes it could be later. And then I'm at work for most of the day. After that, it depends. Some days go late, some not so often. Again, the overtime thing where we're trying to reduce overtime.
So what does late mean? Because when I hear late in Japan, I think like midnight, but late to you could just be like 7 o'clock or something.
Right. So many years ago, it was that midnight. And then you get home. Recently, late would be like 8 or 8:30, so that's nice that you get to go home at 6:30 or 5 or something, 5:30, something like that. And then after work, meet friends, do some shopping, do errands, whatever you need to get done. It depends on the day. I'm also in a comedy group, so there's some stuff with that. It really depends on the day. So.
So you actually have to tell everybody a little bit more about this comedy group that you're part of.
Okay. I'm part of a group, and it's a mixture of Japanese and non-Japanese people, and we do improv comedy in both English and Japanese. And we do that here in Tokyo. So if you're ever in Tokyo, come out and see us. We're the Pirates of Tokyo Bay. But yeah, that group is really fun because you get to do both the English and the Japanese parts, and so I find that really interesting to see the differences in Japanese and
I know. I think like so many of the people who are performing, you can tell like they're just, you have to be, I feel like you just have to be so smart in both languages, because you're not just communicating in one language, you're actually saying a lot of, like making a joke in another language is a completely different experience from just speaking the language itself, you know? So once you're able to make a joke in another language, I think you've like really accomplished something, you know?
Yeah, I feel that way. I hope that's the case because that's what I'm going for. But it is a different experience. And sometimes it's easier in a foreign language and sometimes it's harder.
Right.
So it depends. But it is a lot of fun to be able to do that and experiment with that.
And would you say that getting involved with the Pirates of Tokyo Bay has really enhanced your experience and lifestyle of being here in Japan?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's a great group. So there are a lot of people. We have about 16 people now in the group.
Yeah.
And it's great to have that group of friends because we are, I think, are all friends off stage as well.
Right.
So it's great to have that group of friends, and we do have a lot of support because we are, at least half of us are non-Japanese people living in Japan.
Yeah.
So that's one of the groups where you can kind of get help, information, stuff, and things associated with being a foreigner living in Japan.
Yeah.
We are that support network for each other.
Yeah, that makes
so
sense.
that definitely helps from that perspective. And then, like I said, the friends, and then it's just fun doing improv, at least for me.
Yeah. So do you have any tips for people who are thinking of living in Japan, or maybe who currently live here but they're trying to integrate themselves a bit more? Do you have any tips for living in Japan?
Yeah, that's a hard one. I do think the more you get out and see stuff, it's going to help you. So definitely take a walk around the neighborhood. Definitely, if you're visiting Tokyo for the first time to live here, go walk around. It's really informative to head into a supermarket. It's really informative to head into a bank. And the other really good thing about Japan in some ways, and sometimes can be very frustrating or whatever, is there's a lot of documentation.
Yes.
on just about anything.
Yes.
So you can get buried in paperwork, but with stuff being online and Google Translate and stuff like that, you can figure stuff out. So there's the government agencies, the post office, etc. They do put a lot of stuff online, and more of it is becoming in English. So
I know. I always found that amazing how Japan is one of the most technologically advanced places, but then there's so much paperwork that you have to do anyways. They still use fax machines.
Yeah, we still use fax machines.
Yeah, so very like old and new stuff, like there's a big gap between like how we use technology and stuff. But yeah, it's definitely good to just go online and see if you can have something to help you fill out those forms.
One other thing, just as a random thing,
Yes.
if you're coming to Japan and living here and you want a bank account in Japan, go ahead and make the hanko, the stamp.
Yes.
I have had so many friends who have tried to do the signature. There is an out where they try to do the signature and they end up with so many problems later.
I know. I got to tell you a little quick story, but I actually lost my wallet while I was in Shibuya. And the only way I got to Shibuya was that I had my train pass, so I was able to get off there. But luckily for me, I had my health insurance card, which is a form of ID, and I also had my passbook with me in another part of my purse. And I was like, perfect, I can go to the bank, I can take out some money, and I can pay for the train and go back home. I didn't have my stamp, my hanko stamp, and they're just like, no, sorry. If you don't have your stamp, you're not allowed to get any money out. And I was like, I have my ID and I have my bank passbook. And they're like, sorry, if you don't have your stamp. And then the funny thing is that you can actually take out money for somebody else if you have their stamp. But you can't take out money for yourself if you don't have your stamp. So I know it can be a little bit frustrating, but yeah, absolutely. Getting your stamp is probably the first thing that you should do.
Right.
So everybody, we're gonna start wrapping up now. So Trey, is there any way that they can keep in touch with you, or maybe just know about your comedy group to keep in touch with you?
Well, so Pirates of Tokyo Bay we're online at piratesoftokyobay.com, Facebook, Instagram, Line, that's another thing, Line in here in Japan. If you don't use Line outside of Japan, you're gonna use it when you come here. I'm on Instagram and Twitter as Yurt, YERT333. Yurt is Trey backwards, just in case you were wondering where that came from.
I'll leave a link in the comments.
Okay.
Hey, perfect. Thank you so much, Trey.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Thanks. Thank you, guys.